Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bootstrap practical lesson. In this lesson, we'll be applying Bootstrap to the web page we built from HTML the basics. Now, if you remember in our previous practical video, we created our own CSS to style the web page. So we'll pretty much be doing the same thing, but having Bootstrap as our secondary CSS. In a nutshell, we'll be transforming our previous web page, which looked a little bit like this, to this. So a small makeover. Let's get into it. First up, we need to open our CSS in our text editor and comment the paragraphs styling, the form styling, and the table styling. So let's just comment this out with a forward slash and a star. And right here where we close our table, and you click save. Next up, we need to open our HTML file in our editor so that we can add our bootstrap. Now, for this lesson, I'm not going to download Bootstrap. I'm going to um, get it from the CDN just for this lesson. So what we need to do is you go to the getbootstrap.com, right? And once you get there, they actually give you instructions on where you need to place the CSS and where you need to place your JavaScript files. So we're just going to copy this and go back to our editor. And just below the CSS that we created, we'll place it over there. That's our CSS. And remember in our theory video, I mentioned that you need to place your JavaScript files before your closing body tag. So we need to scroll all the way to the bottom, and here's our body tag. I think if you want, though, you can just add a comment, call it scripts, and then go back to the Bootstrap documentation, and you're going to copy that as well. Very easy. Goodness. So OCD becomes a real thing again. Just want to indent just to sort of make it look neat. And then you save. Then we go back to our browser and hit refresh. And you can see that your content has somehow shifted. I don't know if you remember, but well, before the changes were applied, our paragraph text was sort of nested, and you can already see the Bootstrap change that sort of gives some breathing space in between your paragraph sentences, which is something that I absolutely love about Bootstrap. But anyway, now we're going to add our web page content inside a Bootstrap um, container class. So a little bit of theory about this container class. Containers are the most basic layout element in Bootstrap and are required when using the Bootstrap default grid system. This is a direct definition that I got from the Bootstrap website, so please mind that hour over there. But in any way, so I'm going to explain how this grid system actually works. The grid system uses a series of containers, rows, and columns to lay out and align content, and it's also responsive. And remember again, this means that it will readjust the content to fit the size of the screen from a small phone to a large desktop. These rows and columns are placed inside the container class. So you can say this container class is like the parent class. So here we have our row and there we have our columns. And the rows are wrappers for columns, and your web content is placed inside these columns. So just to make this easier, think of the grid system like a table which consists of rows and columns. Now, with this Bootstrap grid system, um, each row can only consist of 12 columns, as you can see here. You could specify the columns with any number you see fit as long as the total amounts to 12. Now, in the next example, the two divs example, we have two sections, the one being yellow and the other one being yellow-green. And each section is allocated 6 columns, which is why you get the whole 50-50 type of balance thing. And let me show you how this actually looks like in code. So you'll notice here I have our container class, which is our parent, and then we have our row class, and inside our row class we have to um, specify the columns that we want in each row. So here you see the first column would be column 6, well, the yellow column, which we allocate 6 columns to it, and the second section will be our yellow green, which is also allocated 6 columns. I really hope this sort of makes more sense. But let's look at another example. In this example, we have 3 divs or sections, one blue, green, one blue, one violet. And the blue, green has been given 5 columns, the blue has been given 6 columns, and the violet has been given only 1 column. That's why it looks like this. But the real point here is that with these 3 divs added together, it will amount to 12 columns, which is the ideal number of columns that need to be in each row. Now, let's look at an example where we don't have the ideal number 12. So here we have 3 divs, one violet, red violet, and yellow orange. And the violet and the red violet are given 6 columns, and the yellow orange is given 1 column. Now together, all of these amount to 13, right? Which is not the ideal number. So what Bootstrap will do is that it will take the columns that will amount to 12, and when the number overlaps, it will create a new row. And that is why you have your yellow orange over there. Right. Now let's look at another Bootstrap, I don't want to call it element, but let's call it element in this case, called an offset. So now I normally call this invisible columns or just placeholder columns. Now, say for example, you have one section, which is in this case the red orange, and it takes up 4 columns. And then we apply an offset of 4. So the result will be that it will center the red orange section right in the middle and add the invisible columns of 4 on both sides of red orange. And if you take the offset number as well as the column number, the section number or the section column number, which is also 4, 4 plus 4 plus another 4 is going to equal to 12. Hence why you have it looking like this. And I can show you this, what it looks like in code. So you have your row and you specify your column 4, which is going to be your red orange, and you just write offset or class offset 4, and that will give you, you know, the 2 invisible columns. I really, really hope that makes sense. Let's look at another example, an offset example. So there we have our column 3 and we have our offset 3, then another column 3 and another offset 3. And the sole purpose here was that we need to generate um, 12 columns, which we achieved because we have column 3, offset 3, and you get 6, and then another column 3 and another offset 3, and you get another 6, and it will amount to 12. Now, if you go back to the Bootstrap documentation, they state that you can specify the max container width. So you'll have, your call SM, your call MD, and your call, etc. But for me, I don't add any specifications to my max container width. That way, it will apply across all the screens. So I just settle it at class call with the dash and the number of the columns. I don't get why it's extra small, but then it will apply to all the screens. It's like a default. And if we look here, let's try to make the screen smaller. You can see that nothing has changed. Everything has stayed the same. Hence why I say I just use call with the number and it will be applied to all the screens. I really, really, really hope that makes sense. So next up, let's just add the div, what's this, the container class to our web content. And if you can see here, even we added a container class and it added some extra, you know, padding on the side, which I think is pretty cool. That's what I love most about Bootstrap. But anyway, let me stop talking and actually start coding. Now, back in our editor, just below the body, we're going to add a div and we're going to call it class container, right? And remember to always close the div. So we're going to close this right above our scripts. Then we're going to save. Going to go back, just make this bigger and refresh. And you see that the container class has been applied and we have our paddings on the side, which is pretty cool. Next up, we will be um, adding some Bootstrap styling to our form. And before we add the Bootstrap to our form, I would like to add a, a heading to just, state that our next section will be a form. And I'm going to write some code, but I'm going to explain what all of this means after. So we have our div class and deflex. Oopsie. Justify content center. So we want our heading to be in the center. And maybe we'll use maybe an H5 or an H4. Let's take H4. Call it form. We close our H4 and we close our div. And then we save. So low key for content alignment, Bootstrap makes use of a flexbox container. And what flexbox means is that it's just a web layout model that allows elements to align and distribute space within the container. Now, in this case, we wanted to align our header in the center. So instead of using the CSS text align element like we did over here, remember this, we will just use the uh, justify content utility on the flexbox container to change the alignment of the flex items. So this justify content, we wanted it in the center, right? And yeah, that's basically it. I really, really, really hope that makes sense. So now we need to go back to our form. So what I normally do when I use Bootstrap, I always have the documentation open on one side, just in case I miss anything. So in this case, we're going to go back here and we're going to search for forms, just so I can show you that, all of this is just not made up in my head. Um, right, so you see the difference here between our HTML code and Bootstrap's one is that they apply a class to their form, which is exactly what we need. Now, this form group class will be for each label and another form input that's associated to that label. So I'll make an example. Let me just show you how it is. So like here we have our form, right? We're still on the right track. And we have our name and we have our text in which our text input in which we're going to fill in our name. So what we're going to do here then is additive class and we're going to call it a form group, right? And then we're going to close, in fact, remove these break tags as well. Remember we added these break tags because the form was so nested and there was no breathing space. But in any case, so we have our form group and we have our input label and we close our div. And we're going to do the same for the next one. Um, Class and form group. And we're going to close our label and text area, div. And we're going to have our number input. So again, class. I mean, you can just copy this if you want. I just like typing because it makes me feel like I'm doing a lot. Oh no, right. And just scroll down. The last one does not have a label. Right. Class, form, group, and we close our. Hey, what's going on? There you go. Div. Let's just create some space there. So let's give it a label. I'll copy this one instead. Label for, let's say, colors, because that's what our drop down is, right? Oopsie. Then we can say colors here. Yeah, cool. I think I've covered it. And then we save. And then if we go back to our Bootstrap documentation, we see here that every input control has a class associated to it. And the reason for this is that, well, this is what I think. It's going to apply CSS to that specific control. I'll show you an example, right? You see how this password input control is so bordered and kind of clean and neat looking. Cool. So we've saved our work, right? Right. If we go back to our site and save it, we can see here we have our justify content center, our heading, which is cool, and our form still looks the same, even though we've applied, some Bootstrap to it. So the only thing missing now is that we need to add the form input class to our input controls. So if we go back to the documentation, just copy this and go back to your editor and you have input here, and then just add class form control. Same thing with your text area. So anything that is going to capture information, add form control. Okay, add the class. here, and then we save. If we go back to our form and then we refresh, and Bootstrap is applied to our form. And now it also looks, neat and whatnot. And there's something really bothering me about this form is that it's too wide, you know? Okay, the name and the content I get, but now how about maybe if we just put the number input as well as the colors drop down side by side. And that is where we're going to be using our grid system. So let's go back here and we're going to add a row, right? Div class. Because remember, we had to have our container and then we have our row and then we have our column. Uh, can I just push this a bit to the side? And then we're going to close that just below our drop down because that's where the row needs to like end. And then we add our column. So because you already have class, initiated. I'm not sure if that's the word, but you already have your class stated. You don't need to write class again with your, um, number of columns. You can just continue with the existing class that's already there. It's not going to override anything. It just means you're adding another class. So just a space and we call it, see, we give it 6 columns because we want it side by side, equally split. Same thing here, call 6. And then we save. Go back here, refresh. And then we see we have our number and we have our colors side by side. That's pretty cool. And if we make our screen smaller again, because Bootstrap is responsive, we still have our number and our colors side by side. So that's pretty cool. So next up, we're going to be looking at our table. So again, we go back to Bootstrap documentation and search for a table. And there are many, many different types of table classes that you can use. So in this instance, I want a bordered table, right? Um, yeah. So I'm going to copy this class here. And I'm going to go back to our HTML. Here's our table. And here we have our table tag, and we just apply the class just as it is stated here in our Bootstrap documentation. Table, class, you get the picture. And that's basically all we need. Then we just save and we refresh. And we have borders applied to our entire table. I don't know if you remember our previous, what was this page, before we added Bootstrap, how awful it kind of looked. So now it looks really pretty. But now, say for example, I wanted to apply a different type of class to my table heading. Apologies. I'll go back here and say I wanted table head options, right? And I wanted a light table head. So I just copy this T light. This dot, remember it stands for class. So I go back here and in my T head, I add my class. And yay, we have a beautiful light-headed table. All right, next up, we're going to look at some lists and how to actually overwrite certain Bootstrap elements. So we go back to our documentation and look for lists or list group. Okay, and we have a really basic example over here. I think that's the one example I'm going to use. And I see for this example, they made use of a unordered list. So that's exactly what we're going to do to our unordered list. So let's go to class, just copy that, go back to your code, and thereby unordered, just add your, oh, no, hold on. I already copied that, so there you go. And then if you go back to our documentation, we need to add um, the list group item class to our lists. So you're just gonna copy that, go back here, let's add that and that, right? And let's save. Okay, now we have our list, but you can see clearly that we don't have any text. And this is because Bootstrap's list item color is white, and we also specified in the CSS that we created that we want this div section color or text color to be white. So we can just overwrite it. Uh, just do this. Go here. We're going to do inline CSS. So style and color, make it gray. Okay. And let's just refresh, and we have that. So now I want to add a hover color, and I want to change the text of the list when I hover over it. And this is where we're going to overwrite the Bootstrap CSS. So let's go back to our editor, and we're going to come to our CSS. So now all the way to the bottom, we're going to add our class with a hover feature. So what's our class here? We have list group item, right? Because when you hover over the item, you want that to change. So there you go. Just add a dot in front to indicate a class, and you're going to colon hover. Right. So we want to change the background color to, what was that color that we used? We used this one, right? But we don't want it to look the same as the ordered list, so we need a different kind of version of the color. So what I'm going to do here is go to color hex. Don't know if this was the, okay. Oh, goodness. All these ads. So we want a lighter shade of it. So let's take this color. Let's copy that and paste that here. So that's our background color that we want. Right. And then you're going to use this important, and that means you're overwriting an existing styling that is applied to the very same item. Okay, and then let's use color again. This is the text color, and I want to use this one. Okay, and again we apply important. Okay, cool. I think that should work. And then we just, and when we hover, we can see that, right? The hover color is pink, pink. Okay, that's pretty cool. Okay, so we leave the link as is, and now we're going to be styling the button using Bootstrap. We go back to our documentation. And you'll see here that there are different types of buttons. There's a primary button, secondary button, etc, etc. And you can make use of these buttons by just specifying the specific class that belongs to the button. So for this lesson, I want to use an info button. So I'll be copying just the class. Go back here. Um, Button. There you go. Just as it's stated in our documentation, we need to apply the class to the button tag. And yeah, we save. Then we go back here. The button is changed and it looks super nice. And remember that when we hovered over the button, it got bigger and smaller. The concept is still there. And in order to achieve this, you need to again overwrite the CSS and apply important. I've already done this clearly, but where is it? There you go. I've already applied the CSS. The only thing I only changed nothing really. I only added important at the end of my styling. And that is how you, you know, override the Bootstrap CSS. If that was not there, so I'll just remove it. Uh, it was gonna be horrible. Okay, save. See, it was gonna do that. So now here we are again writing over Bootstrap CSS, and it will glide. Okay, and our last element is going to be um, our image. Nothing really special about this. Is just we're going to add the image rounded class to sort of get rid of these edges over here. So let's go back to our documentation, images, and we're going to use here you go. We're going to use this class, but I think we already have a class already there, so we're just going to add an extra class to our image. Yeah, here we go. And when we refresh, you'll see the edges are like sort of rounded up. And because you want our image to be responsive as well, um, we need to apply the image fluid clause. We need to add it on. So just copy that and just add it before. Yeah. Wait. Why did I? No, this float left was not supposed to be here. There you go. And oopsie. And yeah, no changes. It's just that our image will be responsive, meaning it will adjust to whatever screen. And yeah, guys, that it um, concludes the practical lesson for Bootstrap. There is a whole lot more to learn about it. And I think we'll cover most of them once we start building our very first portfolio website, because we'll cover certain things like alerts and pop-ups and all of that, which is going to be pretty cool. And for the time being, I think you can just, read some more on getbootstrap.com about some of the elements that we did in this video. Just gather some knowledge. And yeah, but yeah, that concludes our video, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. And in our next practical video, we'll be learning about some JavaScript. It's going to be difficult, but we'll get there. And yeah, thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you. I'll see you next time.